On today's show, we're going to do a deep dive into Stanford's Haley Jones in episode 3 of our 2023 WNBA Draft Prospect Profile series. Locked on Women's Basketball starts now.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Welcome, you're Locked On Women's Basketball. My name's Hunter Cruse. I'm a Saturday host covering the WNBA Draft and college basketball at large. Thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. I'm joined by co-host Em Adler. Em is a beat writer for the Seattle Storm and heads our written coverage of the WNBA Draft at thenexthoops.com. So our discussion today is Stanford's Haley Jones, 6'1" forward. I'll give it to you, Em, just to give me the stat profile and just how does she profiles as a player?
A lot of stats to go over here with her. Obviously, first thing to start off, she is 6'1", probably has at least a 6'2" or 6'3" wingspan, but Stanford doesn't give us that information, so we just have our sight lines to go off of and what the average wingspan for someone who's 6'1" is. She gets to the rim very well. She gets to the rim more than most forwards in the country. She gets into the paint really well. She finishes really well from the paint overall, but she's about average at finishing at the rim, which, to be clear, is kind of an improvement over yesteryears. In terms of her shot profile, she spent a couple years taking some threes. She basically doesn't take them anymore, and she really could never hit them efficiently. So you're not looking at a three-point shooter. She really, really loves going right to left on pick and rolls, on drives, on really anything there. She can finish with either hand pretty well. She's very athletic. She'll finish through contact. And that's why her free throw rate is pretty much increased significantly from her underclassmen years. Sort of defies positional boundaries is, I think, what we're going to get to a lot in this show.
So the main standout for her offensive profile is just how she excels in transition. But once you get besides that, because in transition, how I would describe her athleticism specifically is whenever she has room to build up her speed, it's greater. I think she can get by defenders better. But in more half-court situations, you'll see where she struggles to get by really anybody. And she'll really utilize her her shiftiness, her elusiveness to get around defenders, spin moves, zero steps, rather than having that straight line burst to get past defenders like you see with some other players. And she can't really shoot. And something you'll talk about with her is her pick and roll ball handling ability. It's great, but what makes her at a disadvantage ultimately is because teams are not going to go over on any screens. They're going to go under and give her that mid-range pull if she has it. It's not super efficient. They'll give her the three-point shot as well, but she doesn't really take it. She's hesitant to take it. And so if she's not the greatest athlete in terms of speed and she's already at a disadvantage, the defender's already got a couple steps on her, it's really hard to just kind of project her as a positive half-court offensive contributor at the next level. And so what do we think is her idealist outcome as I guess it'd be to be this jumbo creator sort of with her size and strength. But in a realistic scenario, if she's not drafted number 1, number 2, number 3, maybe, how do you see her being developed as a pro? If that's at the end of the lottery, if that's outside the lottery, where do you kind of see that coming about?
Looking at that and the fact that the shot hasn't improved, it's unlikely that it will at this point. But if the shot improves, then you have someone who can really be sort of a combo utility wing, but being excellent defensively at the same time. If you turn up her athleticism a little bit, if you think for some reason you can get her faster with conditioning at the next level, then I think that's the key to being able to play her at the 1, because she can't really beat anyone off the dribble. And I think if you can't beat someone off the dribble, then it's really, really hard to play as a point guard, because teams don't need to respect you with help defense, which means there's no one to pass to. So there's a lot of different directions it can go in. She's really, anyone can look at her and get a different sort of impression of what direction they want her to go in. And the problem is that I think, if you improve any one of these skills that I just mentioned, then she develops into someone who is a really valuable role player, really valuable. But also, all the skills we just mentioned are ones which we would have expected to improve by now. And at this point, given where she is, seem unlikely to improve.
So after the break, myself and Em will break down the defensive portion of Jones's game and more. As a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open job with targeted tools to go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. Identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to screen and rate applicants all on one platform. It's why small business owners rank LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs to find the quality candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba. To post your job for free, terms and conditions apply. And we're back. I'm your host, Hunter Cruse, and I'm joined by my co-host, Em Adler. So just give me the scout for Jones as a defender and where you see her game going at the next level.
So the thing about Haley Jones as a defender is everything looks really good. Everything looks really good is just, I think, the easiest way to put it. Whatever she does, whether it's the use of her hands, whether it's the use of her footwork and the use of her legs and body in ISO defense, whether it's help from the weak side, everything looks really good. And it jumps out to you on the page. There's a reason she's, like Pac-12 all defense every year. And there's a reason why that's, the calling card. We talked about defenders will always go, and at this point in college, defenders always go under every one of her ball screens when she's a handler and pick and roll. She goes under every ball screen defensively, and it's a little hard to say whether that's because of her comfort or because of her assignments, but certainly there are times when she kind of gets killed on just like free throw line pull-ups from mid-range pick and rolls, and you got to ask yourself, why is she not going over and funneling them into literally Cameron Brink defensively? There are some footwork issues there. In terms of, I talked about her speed as a point guard. If you want a player at the one at the next level, are you having her defend ones? Stanford has never had to defend ones, still have her guard 3s and 4s, occasionally 2s. And I think that says something. A lot of people think that she could guard ones at the next level. It's a concern for me. But I think her front court defense, to me, what you expect out of a forward, is pretty excellent. And I don't see any reason why, at least on face value, that stuff should not translate it, other than her height. Again, another reason why I'm curious about her wingspan. So it's worth noting, for listeners who may not be aware, because this is really not common knowledge, for men's basketball players, and obviously, there's the selection bias caveat here, which is when you are looking at a basketball player, they are more likely to have a longer wingspan than their height because they're basketball players, because that's what makes you, that's one of the biggest physical indicators, is having a nice wingspan. So a male NBA player, it usually has a wingspan on average about 3, I think maybe 3.5 inches longer than their height. A WNBA player or a women's basketball player, on the other hand, usually their wingspan is about 1.5 inches longer than their height. So for Haley Jones at 6'1", that 6'2.5" would be an average wingspan given her height. And out of a 4, who's out of your primary paint help defender, you're not going to want to be running someone out there unless they have a wingspan of 6'4" or higher. I honestly don't know. She doesn't look like someone who has a wingspan especially longer than maybe 6'3", but she certainly has demonstrated the skills of someone who has a longer wingspan than her listed height.
So from a team scenario situation, assuming she isn't the number 1, number 2 pick, what do you think is the best outcome for her from a developmental standpoint? Just how teams tend to develop players. You could argue Dallas at 3, Washington at 4. Where do you think it is that you'd say is okay, I feel confident that this team can position her best as a pro?
Not Dallas. Anywhere other than Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I shouldn't say anywhere other than Dallas, but like for every prospect, I feel significantly worse about their chances of developing anything when they go to Dallas. I mean, my thing with Veronica Burton last year was If someone can just get that jump shot a little less janky. And then she went to Dallas. And I was like, all right. It didn't look great last year. Honestly, as I talked about with the offense thing, it's what do you see her as? And I think that is what would vary the most team to team, and also what would make the biggest difference to me in terms of my outlook for her. Washington is a place where people have developed quite well, but also they've only drafted a small handful of people over recent years, and that's been people that they've already liked in the first place. Seattle is a good place where people have developed, but they're in the same camp. They've traded away almost all of their first-round picks in the past 5 years. Places where people develop are hard to tell just because of how much these things trade hands, and just because, you've done the research on this of how hard it is for really draft picks past the lottery, past the top half of the first round to make their roster and get decent playing time. I think in Washington, they would be keen on her defense, and they would probably be working a lot on the jumper to see if they could help that and to see if they could, help her fit into a wing role. Probably. I think in Chicago, she'd be given the reins to be more of a point guard, given what they need at the moment and given the openings on the roster. So we could see maybe she would develop as a point guard there. It's hard for me to tell, honestly. Just especially because, Stanford is a place where people have developed. Look at Cam Brink's development. Look at how Hannah Chubb has developed over the years. And those are just the recent players there. They have draft picks every year. And I've heard a pair of pretty good sisters at the WNBA level because they are not a place where people don't develop. Given how she has or has not improved since her freshman and sophomore years, again, it's just hard for me to say.
Yeah, because we touched on it before in this episode, but there's just so many outcomes that she could take as a player, and she just seems like the type of player where we look back at her career and we say, okay, her career might have been differently if she went to a different situation. You could talk about it, I think the easiest comparison, shooting-wise, is Ben Simmons on the NBA side, where they just never asked him to develop as a shooter. They never actually, pushed him to it, and if he didn't shoot, they weren't, reducing his minutes because of it. They were a tanking team, and they let him do what he really wanted to do out there, and just never developed as a shooter. And I'm worried in the case of Haley Jones that she just does not ever shoot. And there's only a certain amount of players that can just not shoot. Alyssa Thomas is one, but that's such a far outcome and degree to hit.
And Alyssa Thomas is probably your closest WNBA comp, honestly.
Right.
Haley Jones, but Alyssa Thomas is also huge. And I'm not talking about huge in a Shaq kind of way, but for being, I think she's listed at 6'2", she's insanely built and she has a massive wingspan and she is able to just go through defenders to be playable offensively in a way Haley Jones hasn't demonstrated yet.
So yeah, if we're talking about okay, she could learn behind Alyssa Thomas in Connecticut, but it's hard to see her getting a lot of minutes then, just because of how crowded that front court is, and how much of an overlap there is. So maybe Connecticut goes a different direction, because they have some expiring contracts coming up in the coming years, and she's a player they can just build around, and develop more of her game. I just don't think she has the chance to develop as a shooter there right now.
Yeah, and in terms of the Ben Simmons comp, I talked about that with respect to her, I think, in her sophomore year. And look, Philly wanted Ben Simmons to shoot. They tried having him to shoot, but as the excellent Yaron Weitzman book, Take It to the Top, details, there were accountability problems in that organization where they couldn't really hold people to standards that they were trying to set. But that's beside the point. In terms of Haley Jones and making a jumper, like we said with Alyssa Thomas, there are players who succeed without having a jump shot or having a decently good one from three. Haley Jones probably has a pretty decent jumper. It's improved this season, at least, from around the free throw line, around the elbows, and you can survive like that in the WNBA. You can be quite good in many ways. You just have to be able to hit on the other things, and you have to be able to play. Maybe, but probably not the three. Definitely, you should be able to play the four at that point. And it is the question of, does she have the strength at 6'1", at whatever her wingspan is, to hold up at the four at the WNBA level? because we're still running out two big lineups from a bunch of teams at the W level in a way that, someone who's her equivalent in the men's NBA, you know, the male version of Haley Jones would be about 6'7" and would probably be an excellent fit for the Thunder, who have a top 10 defense this year. But we don't play like that in the women's side yet. And for someone like her, that's a big disadvantage.
And when it relates to Haley Jones, like you said, there's some limitations there at the 4. It's tough because there's limitations at any position she's going to play, and massive limitations at that. But I think the best way to maximize her as a rookie is just giving her the floor to run. I think a team that's going to play up tempo is good for her because that's what she's comfortable with.
For sure.
Many times during broadcasts, they'll show okay, what are the keys to stop Haley Jones, and it's always keep her from running wild in transition, because like you said there, in semi transition she'll come up with those elbow jumpers, or sometimes come up with those free throw line jumpers. Her jumper is kind of long. I don't know why, it just looks a little long to me, and whenever she shoots it, it kind of too motiony.
You want to tuck your elbow, but her elbow, there's a lot of elbow in her jump shot, I think, is the only succinct way for me to describe it. It is very two motioning. Her feet are very close together. I know there's a lot of leg strength she could get on her long jumpers that she doesn't, just because it's weird in a whole bunch of ways. And the thing about, we're talking about functional strength, we're talking about a jump shot now. I was talking about her mid-range, I alluded to in the beginning, and just now, it improving this year. But the reason I sound so hesitant is because you can see in years past, she's not nearly as efficient on the mid-range jumpers as you want her to be, or as really you'd expect her to be, because she gets a lot of open looks around the free throw line, honestly, on those pick and rolls, snaking them. She handles them well. She gets herself into space. But there are a lot of times where she just gets wide open, dribble jumper at the free throw line, and it back rims. There are a lot of times where it just looks like she pulls up and her shoulders are still rotating forward. She's not stable. She's not rising straight up or able to stabilize herself in midair before she releases the shot. And it's led to some pretty wild misses, at least until this year. That's really not the hardest thing to fix in a player. That's just, fixing a little bit of core strength, a little bit of leg strength, and just rising a little bit stronger on your dribble jumpers. So, if that has genuinely improved as a mechanical thing this year, wouldn't shock me, but that is something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and overall, Haley Jones is an extremely interesting prospect, and someone I'm certainly going to look back on in my evaluation. It's going to be really telling, because these players that are really good ball handlers, but they kind of like the shooting and the speed, they're interesting players, and she's kind of funky. And it's certainly a really good example of just someone who just does not have a position, and we'll see how that translates as the WNBA moves more positionless. And ultimately, I'm excited to track her game, because at Stanford right now, they're extremely talented team. We see them alongside Hannah Jump, running off movement screens. We see Cameron Brink inside. Some of the greatest verticality I've seen from a big prospect ever. Thanks for making Women's Basketball your first listen today. Now make your second listen Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked Game to Game covers every game across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available in the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. And next week, myself and Em will dive into Tennessee's Rakia Jackson and Jordan Horston. Continue with our scouting report series, 2023 WNBA Draft. Thank you.